Hi everyone. So today's agenda is doing a HTTP callout using Flow, and there are also query parameters that we could pass. So how to pass query parameters. Also, we'll see how to pass values in the headers. So let's quickly begin. Now there are two APIs that we are going to use. One is weather API and the second one is currency API. Now for the weather API, what we are going to do is we'll pass the query parameters because that is how they want the parameters to be. And for the other API, which is currency API, we would be passing the values that we want to pass. Let's say the API key, we would be passing it in the header. Okay. So let's first start by looking at weather API and how do we call it from flow and how do we pass the query parameters. So let's quickly begin. So the first prerequisite that we need for this is, first of all, we need to create an external credential. So how to do that is you simply have to type named credential in the setup and you will be landing over here. Now, even before you create a name credential, you are supposed to create an external credential. So let's quickly create that. Now I'm going to call it as weather external credential 1. Okay, and we are going to keep it custom. So now we have the external credential. Now the second step is that we need to create a principal on top of this external credential. So let me say weather principal. Okay, and the sequence number would be 1. I don't want to add any authentication parameter. I'll just save this. Now the next thing is first we create the name credential. So we have this new external credential. So let me create a name credential. I'm creating a name credential, weather API 1. Okay. And the endpoint, which we are going to use for this weather API, right, is this one. Hold on. Let me get the, yeah. Okay, this is the endpoint. And external credential, we are going to use this weather external cred 1. I'll uncheck the generate authorization header and just save this. Okay. And we have enabled for callouts. Okay. Now, we see there are 3 named credentials. Now, the next thing that we are supposed to do is, for the profile that I'm using, I need to give access to that external credential. So let me go here and I'll type profile. Okay, now here you see enabled external credential principal access. So here is where we need to give that external principal that we created. No, we need to give access for that. So here you saw we created external credential, and in this external credential, we created a principal, right? Weather principal. So I need to provide access of that to the particular profile who is going to access that API or who is going to call that API. So currently I'm doing it from my user is having system administrator profile. So I went in the profile. I went in enabled external credential principal access and I added that principal into the list of principals for which this profile is going to have access on. Okay, we are done with that. Now, what we need to do is we could create a auto-launched flow also to, use a HTTP callout, or we could create a screen flow also. Now, you could use the HTTP callout in trigger also, but I guess when you use it in trigger, you can't use it immediately. You need to have a scheduled path, and in that scheduled path, you can add the HTTP callout. So for our reference purpose, what I'm doing is I'm using a screen flow. So let me select the screen flow here. What I'm going to do is in the screen flow, I'll choose action and select create HTTP callout. Now here we'll choose the weather API 1. So now you got it. Why did we create the name credential? Because it is mandatory to use name credential when you want to do HTTP callout from flow. So that is why we created this name credential. Now we'll do next. We are going to get it, right? We are going to get some values from that API. So I would say the method is get. Now, this is where I'm going to add my query parameters. So the first key is key, and the data type would be string. And I want to make this parameter as required because that is what they are saying in their website, the documentation of this API. The other one is a Q parameter in which we could pass anything, the latitude, longitude, or the city name or something like that. So I would say I am creating one more query parameter called Q. And again, I would make that required. It's not mandatory to enter anything in the description. You could leave it blank. Now we'll do next. Now, here what is it doing is, you could either give a sample response that you have by selecting example response and doing next. If you do that, see, here you could paste that sample and then you would get the entire data structure. If not, let's do one thing. We would get the actual response from that particular endpoint. If you want to get the actual response, then you would use connect for schema. Now, why are we doing all these things? Because see, when you get the response, right? When you do a API call out from your Apex class, you get a response and then you deserialize that response and then get the needed properties. So here also, if you want to get those properties, you need to tell Salesforce flow, right? That, what are the properties that you will be getting. So for that, you have these two things. So let us do connect for schema. I'll do next. And now here you finally have to put your key. Now I don't want to show you guys my key. So I'm just putting some value over here. And in Q, which is a query parameter again, I would say the city is Mumbai. Now the moment I do connect, here you can't see that because the API key that I've given is incorrect. So let me do one thing. Let me put the correct key and then I'll show you. Okay. So what I did is I entered the correct key. Then I clicked on connect. When I did that, you see, this got created automatically. So we got the response because here I've passed the city as Mumbai. So for Mumbai, it is giving me the weather details over here, right? You could see over here. Let me show you the temperature and everything. You see, here we get the temperature and all. And accordingly, it created the entire data structure. Now, if I want to, display some particular field from this response that we have got, we could do that. Okay. Let me just save this. Okay, so now we have saved it. And here too, I need to give the value and then click on done. So let me do that. So all I've done is I entered the value for both for the key and for Q parameter, and I just clicked on done. Now, why I didn't show you is because I didn't wanted to show you guys my key. So all I've done is just enter those values. Earlier, when we had entered, it was just to get the response. And the next one is so that whenever this flow runs, no, that time it needs to get that key and the Q parameter. That is why we had to enter it again. Now, once the call out would be done, then let's suppose I am going to create a decision element and I would say, is it successful or no? Okay. I would say yes. And here I would say response code. If it is equal to 200, it means it is successful. And if it is successful, I would just add a screen over here. And just display some of the parameters. So I would say output. This is what we need to go inside. Location. And I would say, let's say region. Okay. Let us drag one more. I would say temperature. What did I call this? Okay, nothing. Region. And I would say temperature. Okay. That's it. And we are done. Okay. I'll just do done and save. Now I'll go to, let's say, account object and create a button. From this action that I'm creating, I'll be calling the screen flow. Hold on. We need to activate this. That is why we are not seeing it. Okay, we have the weather flow now. I'll call it weather and just save. Let me go to the account, page layout. Okay, account layout. And I'll add that quick action that we created. Here it is, weather. And I'll just save. Let's go to some of the existing accounts. and you see the weather button. So let me click on the weather. Okay, now you see we got the region and we got the temperature. I think it is in Fahrenheit. Okay, so this is how you call a flow. You make a HTTP call out from flow, and you could pass the query parameters. Now let us look at the other API where we are going to pass the API key as a header and not as a parameter. So let's quickly begin. Now for that, again, we need to create one more name credential. So let me go to name credential. But before that, as you know, we need to create an external credential. So let us quickly create an external credential. I would name it as currency external cred. Okay, so now as you know that we need to create external credentials. So let's create an external credential first for the currency API. I would name it as external credential 1. And again here, the authentication protocol would be custom. And let's just save it. Once we are done, again, we would create a principal for this. And I would call it as currency principal. And just save it. Now we are going to create the named credential. And I would name it as currency converter API 1. I've enabled it for callouts. Let's paste the URL. This is the URL. Let's put the external credential, which is currency external cred 1. I would remove this and just save. Okay. Now, let's go back to our flow. Now, you would notice one thing. Let me create a flow. Let me create a new flow. Again, I would create a screen flow only. Action. HTTP callout. Currency converter API 1. And method would be get. Now here you would notice one thing. We have the section to enter the query parameters, right? But we do not have anything to enter the header. So now how do we enter the header? So for that, you need to keep in mind that you cannot add the header from flow. So how can you add header then? There are some websites in which, passing the API key or something like that, there are options. Like in some websites, you could pass it in the query parameters. In some of them, you could pass it in both header or query, and some of them, you have to pass it in header. So then at that time, what you could do is, you could go to the named credential that you have created, not named credential. In fact, you could go to the external credential that you have created. So let's go to the currency external credential. And in the external credential, you will have custom headers. So in custom headers, what you could do is, here is where you pass the header. You could have multiple headers. So let's suppose I'm passing my key here and I'm just saving it. Now I have not entered the right key because it's a secret, so I won't show it to you. But yeah, that's how I've entered the key. Now here we don't need to pass anything, okay? Because we have already entered the API key in the header of the name credential. So I'll do next here and connect for schema to get the response. Right now I won't get the response because the API key that I've entered is not correct. So what I do is, first of all, I'll go back and I would enter the actual API key. So I've entered the actual API key and I showed you how you can go to external credential, and in external credential, you go to the custom header, click on new. Over there, just enter in the key as the key, whatever key you have to put, and in the value, enter the actual key that you have. Okay. Now, next thing is let's create a flow. Again, we would create screen flow, action, HTTP callout, name credential would be this one. Now, in this name credential, I have the external credential. In that external credential, I've already provided the API key as the header. So now here, I don't need to do anything else. I don't need to add the query parameters. It's not required. And we are going to get something. So the method would be get. Now connect for schema. And here we don't have to do anything. Just click on connect. Okay, I get it. So the issue is that the principal that we have created on that name credential, we need to give its access to our profile, right? Like just how we did for the weather API. Similarly, so here I go, I click on edit. So the currency principal that we made in the external credential, its access we need to provide to the system admin profile. So I've done that now. Okay. Okay. Now you see when I clicked on connect, immediately it got us the response. It got us all the currencies and we have the data structure as well. So let us save this. This time, just to save the time, I'm not using any decision and all that. I'm just doing done. And here what I'm doing is adding one more screen. Display text. Let's suppose I want to display Canadian dollar. So what I would do is output from the currency API 2xx inside data, inside that Canadian. And I would say one more. And I would call it INR. Okay. Okay, here we go. I would name it currency flow. Okay. Just save it, activate it. Let me go to the buttons and actions and create a new action. Okay, the name we got by default. I would just say currency and save it. And let me add that quick action on the layout. Let's save this. Okay. Let's refresh. Now, when I click on currency, it should show me the Canadian dollar and Indian currency values. So here we have the values. So this is how you could make a call out, HTTP call out, and you could pass query parameters or you could pass headers. So that is about it. If this video helped, please like, share, and subscribe. Please at least like it so that it reaches to most people, more and more people. So, okay, please do that. Thank you.